Hello and welcome to Todd Talk, where insight meets inspiration. I'm your host, Todd Hiller. I'm an author, speaker, and longtime community leader, here to guide you on a journey towards fulfillment and balance. In every episode, we'll explore ways to fill life's emptiness, helping you uncover practical tools to create harmony, purpose, and happiness. Whether it's thriving in your career, nurturing personal growth, or simply finding joy in the everyday, Todd Talk is your space for real conversations and actionable advice. So let's thrive together, personally, professionally, and beyond. This is Todd Talk, and I'm thrilled to have you here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Todd Talk. Today, I'd like to talk about it's a quote that I heard, and it really struck a chord with me, and it was, while it was on TikTok, while I was scrolling, because we learn lots of things on TikTok, but it was a quote that's attributed to Walt Whitman, and it came from a show that I had not heard of called Ted Lasso, or at least I think that's the character once I did a little searching. And the quote was, "Be curious, not judgmental." And it literally stopped me right from what I was doing. And I sat down because I really wanted to think about this. And as I thought about it, I can't tell you on how many levels it struck a chord with me and how many different things it led me to start thinking about and different situations that I've encountered in my life that really this question or this sentiment about being curious instead of judgmental really would have been different. And so I asked myself how many moments or how many things in my life would have gone differently if curiosity came first instead of judgment. And I thought, and I sat down, and really my brain is still thinking about this, so I thought what better thing to do than sit down and record a podcast about it. One of the things I usually do for my podcast episodes is I usually record some notes and some speaking points so I don't go off on a tangent every which way and drag this, what usually is a 25-minute or so podcast, out into an hour because I got rambling about something. But this struck me so much that I said, let's skip the notes. I just want to speak from my heart because it was such a beautiful sentiment to me and such a beautiful quote that was put so simply, and now my brain is all over the place with grabbing a hold of different things in different instances and different ways to view this idea of curiosity versus judgment through both that lens as well as the lens of other things that have happened to me personally in my life and also things that I have seen happen with other folks that I've talked to and dealt with and friends of mine. So without further ado, let's talk about this. So ask yourself that reflective question for me as we go into this before you start listening, or as you keep listening. So how many moments in your life would have gone differently if curiosity came first instead of judgment? And as you answer that, give yourself a little grace, because if you were the one being judgmental, and I mean, we all do it, because I think judgment is a type of defense mechanism or a survival trait, because that snap assessment, that snap judgment gives us, we have that split-second decision to either make a judgment, because sometimes we don't have time to figure things out. We just have to decide in the moment what we're going to think or what we're going to do. That being said, however, if we do that too often and we have that reflex, that snap judgment go unchecked, it leads itself down a very dangerous road of becoming biases or defensiveness or even disconnect from the people around us or the people that we typically like spending time with. I know personally in my own life that there are people that I hold in very high regard that I'm friends with, that when they've told me something, I've made a judgment first before asking any questions, and then I have taken the step to backpedal and walk myself back and say, hey, listen, let me know more about that. I want to hear more about that. But I think sometimes we inherently as people, we judge first. And it's not, look, don't get too down on yourself or be too hard on yourself, because it is definitely, I think, a human characteristic. But with a little work and a little time and a little attention to this idea, we can be better about that type of thing. One of the things my dad has always told me, and my mom, is that I was such a curious little kid, and I asked so many questions. And I'm sure you've seen the memes about, little kids asking questions. If you're a parent yourself, you know that kids have boatloads of questions. But it's a really beautiful thing, because questions are the product of curiosity, and that's how we learn about things, and that's how we gather information and gather intel. And the more beautiful part about that is knowing the answers is good, and being curious so we can learn is good, and little kids that ask questions because they like to learn or want to learn is good. But curiosity is also humble. It says, hey, I don't know everything. I'd like to learn more. And I think if we look at people, no matter what relationship you have with the person, if you look at the people in your life, in your relationship or your friendship with them, and their relationship and their friendship with you, I think you will find that you would welcome very much the question about your life, about one specific thing in your life, because it would let you know that that person was curious about you and wanted to know more, and was also letting you in on their little secret that, hey, I don't know everything, so I need to ask you some more about this. We all know the phrase, nobody likes a know-it-all. But I think one of the other things that question, that curiosity introduces, besides humility and besides the idea of us being humble because we're saying we don't know everything, we don't know it all, is it allows us to ask, hey, what else might be true about them? And I think sometimes we ask, why is this person like that? And that's a little on the judgmental side. But instead, what if we asked, what else might be true? What else may have happened to this person? What else might be the case, or what else might they be dealing with? There's lots of things, in our day-to-day interactions with other people that make things great and good and beautiful. And sometimes not so great and not so good and not so beautiful. But one of the most beautiful things I have found to be true about my life specifically, and I think the lives of lots of other people, is the beauty of true and deep human connection. It doesn't need to be a romantic connection. It can just be a friendship. But whether it's romantic, whether it's platonic, whether it's a friendship or best friendship, a relationship of any kind, our connections to other people and talking to them and giving and taking in that relationship when it comes to learning about each other and knowing about each other is so beautiful, and I think brings about so much goodness in the form of happiness, for one, from talking and connecting with another person. But also, we are better when we know more about other people and when we ask questions and understand more about situations. So I want to encourage you to ask questions with the people in your life. When a situation comes up, when a conversation happens, you can also use curiosity, I think, as a way to disarm conflict, because everybody here listening, I'm sure, has had an argument with someone. That's basic human nature. But I think a lot of times when we as people argue, we don't mean to argue. We don't mean to create conflict, but we start down the road of conflict because of that judgmental snap assessment or snap decision rather than a little bit of curiosity. But I think that curiosity can sort of disarm that. So if someone says something to you or someone does something to you, a lot of times we want to think, what is wrong with you? But that's pretty accusatory, and I think anybody who's had that phrase spoken to them right away got defensive. So when someone says, what's wrong with you, that's immediately puts the other person on edge, right? Well, what do you mean, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? It's an argumentative statement. But think of the switch of the beauty of this. If you replaced what's wrong with you with what happened to you, think of how much more beautiful space you could create for conversation, for healing, for understanding, for true respectful listening. Think about that difference. Instead of saying, what's wrong with you, ask them what happened to you. What happened? What went wrong? What went on? And let them know that you want to hear what they have to say. Another phrase I am a big fan of is listen to understand, not to respond. I think a lot of times we as people, when we have conversations, we listen, we get the details, and then we say, yep, we know what they want me to say. I can speak right back to that, or I have a story that I can tell them to, or I can relate to that because a similar thing happened to me. But don't always do that. I mean, it's great to have the chance to be on the same page as someone because you can give them a story about your own life that helps them feel like you can connect with them and understand what they're going through. But a lot of times I think it can go a lot further if instead of telling a story and listening just to respond, you just listen to understand. Listen to what they have to say. Sometimes, let's be quite honest, sometimes people don't need us to respond. They just need us to listen, to know that someone will listen and digest what they're saying so they can take that heavy thing they're carrying and hand it to someone else and have us help them carry it. And if you're sitting there wondering, okay, well, I can do that, and I want to do this, and I want to be better with the people in my life and the people I meet and the people I talk to, but how do I do that, Todd? What do I do? How do I change these phrases in my life, and how do I get to a place where I'm using curiosity and not judgment? So let's go through, three phrases. We'll pick three. Three's a nice, easy number. We'll pick three things that you can use that invite curiosity rather than push out judgment. So if you say to someone, help me understand this, could you help me understand this X, Y, or Z thing? Could you help me understand what you're going through? Could you help me understand why you made this decision? That's a huge one. So help me understand, ... right? Whatever you need to fill in the blank there. The other one I think we can use is something like, what led you to that decision? What brought you there? What made you make that decision, or what made you take that action? Because, again, it's a curious question for that person that allows them the space to answer and tell you why they did what they did or why they thought what they thought. And that will go a really long way with people. And I think a third one could be, well, ask them about what they think of something. You know, what's your perspective on this thing? What's your perspective on X, Y, and Z? What's your perspective about this thing that you're going through? What's your perspective on this thing that I just told you about? Invite that curiosity in, and I think it will go a really long way in helping foster better and more complete conversations that don't feel one-sided. Because I myself am guilty. A lot of times when people talk or ask questions or ask me for help, if you can imagine this, and some of you who know me are going to laugh, I like to talk. And sometimes if you ask me a question, I can usually answer it in 10 or 15 words, but usually I'll answer it in 10 or 15 sentences instead because, well, I just like to talk and I like to be helpful with my words. But sometimes I think our conversations don't end up as complete as they could be because we don't have that curiosity that allows the conversation to get pushed forward through those continuing questions. I have a very good friend of mine. One of my favorite things to do with this person is ask questions to each other, and big questions, big broad questions, deep questions, and just walk through them together and kind of bounce ideas back and forth. And, hey, what do you think about this? But the way that situation gets introduced each time is exactly that. Hey, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? You know, the other day, not long ago, I said to this person, hey, I heard this thing in a podcast about dreams and about dreams always being true. What do you think about this? I want to talk about this and take it apart. And those questions that came through, you know, and that led to such a beautiful, deep discussion. And it makes me so happy to have those deep conversations about things. And the way those are created, those deep conversations, and the way they are pushed through and continued all the way to the peak and the height of them being a really great conversation overall is through questions, is through curiosity. Hey, why do you think that? What do you think about this? What's your perspective on X, Y, or Z? And that's a really beautiful thing to do. So I would encourage you to do that when you talk to other people. Now, we talk to other people a lot every day. Who's the other person we talk to a lot and that we're usually not so nice to? I'll give you a quick hint. The answer is the person you see in the mirror. We are, and I have said this lots of times before, we are our own harshest critics on so many levels. So I'm going to ask you right now, turn that question I thought that I gave to you in the beginning of the podcast inward. Turn it on yourself. How do you judge yourself? And I'm sure everybody listening right now is like, oh, well, I don't know, here or there. But if we look at it, I think a lot of times we judge ourselves a lot without even thinking about it. And I've talked about this before, too, when I've said, we are our own harshest critics. We're as hard on ourselves, much harder on ourselves than we are on other people. We wouldn't treat the people in our lives that we love the way we treat ourselves sometimes. So think about that. How many times have you said, oh, I should have known better? Or, oh, I should have done better? Or I should have done that, or I shouldn't have been here, or I shouldn't have made this decision. I'm pretty sure everybody is nodding right along as you're listening to, because we've all said to ourselves, I think at some point, is that, oh, I should have known better. But if instead of you saying, I should have known better, I want you to ask yourself, why did I respond that way? And more importantly, or maybe right along with that, congruently, ask yourself, what is that telling me? This thing happened in my life. Something went right, something went wrong, something went sideways, something didn't go as planned, whatever the situation is. Instead of saying, I should have known better, ask yourself, why did I do or why did I respond the way that I did? What's the reason behind it? Because judgment is just judgment. At the surface level, judgment is just that. It's just a snap assessment. But get to the reasoning. Get to the deep reasoning behind it and the reasons that you did something. Why did I respond that way? Don't be so hard on yourself and just say, oh, I should have known better. Ask yourself what the heck's going on that made you do or say or think what you did, because there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger driving force behind that. And when you ask yourself those questions, self-curiosity, right? Being curious about our own selves and our own needs and the reasons we have acted or reacted the way we have about something leads to a beautiful sense of growth. So let's frame that. So self-curiosity leads to growth. And I think self-judgment leads to frustration. It leads to feeling guilty about doing or not doing something. Sometimes it can lead to shame, which is a whole another terrible avenue to try to push yourself down, feeling shameful about something. So tie yourself to the idea that it is worthwhile, hugely worthwhile, to ask yourself questions about your own reactions, and it is just as important to ask yourself questions about your own reactions as it is to ask other people questions about their reactions and their perspectives, because so many things that happen in our lives day to day, we're programmed to just go through. Think about your average day. You get up, you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you have breakfast, you have coffee, you drive to work, you get the kids to school, you get whatever you do. Your entire morning routine, your entire day, there are lots of things that you do on autopilot. And then when something happens and something comes up, bang, and something throws off your day and something doesn't go as planned, our immediate reaction is to be hard on ourselves because it happened, even though a lot of times it has nothing to do with us. The fact that there's traffic on the highway and you're going to be late to work, it's not your fault that there was traffic on the highway, but what do? We say, oh, well, I should have known better. I should have left earlier. I knew there'd be traffic. I should have known better. Well, okay, maybe you should have known better. But how about you ask yourself instead, why did I do what I did? Well, let's see. I left on time. I still gave myself 10 extra minutes. I knew there might have been traffic, but I had 2 kids to get dressed and fed and out the door to school. I had to stop at the post office before work because I really had to get this thing mailed out. I had to run 2 errands on the way to work, for my boss, whatever it was. And then, I didn't even stop for coffee. So that's why you did what you did. It's not your fault that there's traffic on the highway. So reframe that. Ask yourself, hey, listen, did I have any control over this thing that went wrong? Nope, absolutely not. So don't judge yourself and don't shove all that blame on yourself. And I have a whole nother episode about that, about things that, controlling your reactions, and we have no control over some things in our day, and don't give all your energy to the things that you can't control. But if you want to find that episode, you certainly can. That's a couple episodes back. I encourage you, when this one's over, to go ahead and listen to it. So don't judge yourself really harshly. And I'm going to tie this in also to one of the things I love to speak about. You guys know me. I talk a lot about burnout, and that's part of my speaking career, and my speaking mission is to help people walk backwards from burnout and walk back to a healthier place in their lives. And I think one of the most difficult things to walk back from when that's the case is when you are overwhelmed and you are burned out. I think that our judgment of ourselves is so much more severe, and we judge ourselves so much more harshly or severely when we are overwhelmed, because we don't have capacity to ask those questions. We're just down the rabbit hole of feeling exhausted and like, oh, just one more thing to go wrong. Here it goes. And we don't have the time or the energy to ask ourselves those questions. Hey, why did this happen, or why did I react that way? So if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling overwhelmed, give yourself some credit. Give yourself some permission to have some space and to make some space for you to ask yourself the important questions about your reactions, because I think you'll find that when you do that and create that space for you to listen to yourself and listen to the reasoning that you can put behind some of the things in your day, you'll feel a lot better about things. And it'll help walk you away from judgment and kind of walk you into a place where you keep doing that, and you can make that a habit of when something happens that goes awry or something out of the ordinary happens, it will become habit for you to ask yourself some questions about that situation and the questions about your feelings surrounding the situation, instead of immediately just placing blame on yourself. And also, so if you're a person who deals with other people a lot, whether it's in your own, just your life or your line of work, whatever it happens to be, I want you to hang on to this idea and this phrase too. So I talked before, I was talking about conversations with my friends we were talking about dreams. The way I started that conversation was, hey, I have some curiosity. I heard this thing. I want to know. I'm curious what you think about it. So curiosity starts a conversation. Judgment ends one right away. If something happens and you're in the middle of a conversation and you make that snap judgment, and especially if you tell the other person or project that out to the other person, it will likely just end the conversation right then and there. So use curiosity to start a conversation. And if there's something you need to work through with someone, this can be really beautiful when it comes to conflict. If there's something in your life, in your world, that you want to walk through with someone and you don't want to start a fight, right? You say, there's this thing that's been bugging me, whether it's your spouse, your best friend, your boss, a coworker, I don't care who it is, whoever it is. There's someone in your life that you want to talk to about something. But we all know that dreaded phrase, hey, can we talk? That's like, relationship ending 101 when we were teenagers, right? Or in our 20s. That was the awful phrase. Oh, we need to talk. Oh, God, things are going bad, right? So instead of saying that, you just tell someone, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, which is fine. And there might be a little bit of hesitation on that one. But make sure you're using questions. Instead of saying, you did this thing that really made me angry, approach it a little bit more softly, okay? And walk through it with them. Hey, this thing happened the other day. can you tell me what you were thinking when this happened or what went on? And use that to kind of lead into what was going on. Now, please remember, and I am still a big proponent of being direct with your feelings and telling people how you feel. I don't want you to hide your feelings or push them down and not let them be part of the conversation. Your feelings are valid and important, and obviously that's why you want to have the conversation in the first place. But make sure when you're talking through something with someone, you explore the ideas and you explore the conflict rather than just bringing the conflict up and trying to beat it to death with, hammering comments back and forth in this angry, fiery exchange of words between you and the other person. And as you do that, as you walk through a place where you're finding new ways to handle conflict by asking questions, this can be a really good tool if you are in a leadership role, if you are in a relationship that requires a lot of communication, whether it's, like I said, romantic or otherwise. If you're a parent, if you're a mentor, if you are a peer advocate, if you're a friend for someone, if you're a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen, whatever it is, if you have a relationship with someone where talking and being open to asking questions is something that can be helpful, and I think most relationships will absolutely benefit from curiosity and from asking questions rather than just providing statements, make sure you incorporate that and do those things and bring those things to your relationships and to the experiences in your life, because I think they can do a lot of good, and I think you'll find they are quite helpful. I think if nothing else, being helpful to ourselves and the other people in our lives is something we should definitely strive to do. Finding new ways to be interested and interesting and curious and helpful is all part of that beautiful growth we've talked about in previous episodes, because growth is such a wonderful thing and such a great thing to step into. So maybe this week, if you are having a frustrating moment, if something comes up, think about that. And you can even do some reflection on this if you want. If you're someone who journals or likes to write things down, maybe use it as a journaling prompt. Think of one moment in the past week where you felt judgment rising. It was coming fast and coming quick, and you were just about ready to make that judgment or just push that statement out there without much thought. Ask yourself in that instance, kind of relive it, and say, what happens if I would have asked a question? What happens if I could have found more information out? Could I have got to the conclusion or the resolution that I ended up with quicker or more effectively or more efficiently? And the answer probably is yes. And so the other thing, whether or not you journal, I want to hear about this kind of stuff, because that gives me not only great feedback for the podcast, but also I love talking to people and hearing about people. So share your story with me. If you have a big story, a small story, those big or small moments, I would love, love, love to hear about them. Or if you have a video to post about them, make sure you tag me on social media. I am at Todd W. Hiller on TikTok and Instagram. You can, if you do that and tag me in them, they will show up in my feed and notifications, because I'd love to see them. Or send me a DM about them. I would love to hear about them. One of my most favorite things in this whole world is connecting with people and meeting new people and talking to people. So I want to hear from people just like you, from the people who listen to this podcast, the people who follow me on social media. I want to hear about it. So please, please send me those little clips, those insights, those moments, because I want to know about them and hear about them. I promise I read them all. I do my very best to respond to every single TikTok comment I get and Instagram comment I get. So if you'd like to share that with me, I'd be really grateful for you sharing those moments with me. And as we close, I think maybe we'll close there with asking you folks to be mindful about that. But I'd like to remind you that curiosity is a quiet superpower. I like that. Curiosity is a quiet superpower. It doesn't shout. It doesn't shame. It doesn't yell. It doesn't show up with fireworks. It just invites us to stay human and to stay curious, because one of the most beautiful things about being a person with free thought is to be able to ask questions and learn more about the situations in front of us. So don't just apply them to the skills in your life you want to learn more about. Don't just apply them to the podcast you want to listen to and gain more information about things. Don't just apply them to the YouTube DIY videos you want to watch. Apply them to your human experience with the people around you. Apply those questions and that eagerness to learn to the people in your life and the relationships you are currently involved in. And I think there will be a great way to foster change and growth and really, really positive outcomes. Thank you all very much, as always, for listening. Be well, and I'm going to put some information, some ways to get a hold of me and get in contact with me in the description of the podcast. So check those out if you'd like to, if you need a way to get in touch with me, or follow along on social media as we continue this journey together. Thank you all very much. Be well, be safe, take care. Until next time. Thanks for tuning in to Todd Talk. If you've liked what you've heard, please go ahead and subscribe and follow along so you don't miss any updates or new episodes. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.